Today's character of choice is going to be Eno. Let's jam. So for this guy, we're going to be shaking things up just a tad bit. For the most part, we're going to be avoiding the stuff like I did in my last video, breaking down every character like piece by piece, and instead giving you general archetypes of what the characters are based on. For example, Mei, Leo, Kai, Soul, all are in the balance category, all have very similar DPs, very similar projectile things to avoid, etc. So that way we'll bunch all of those together, group them up. I'll talk about some character specific stuff if it comes up, but for the most part, just simple things. That way I do not date the video. I hope you guys completely understand where I'm coming from. I just don't want to date the video and or give you false information if a patch comes out or if things get updated. You guys already kind of see where I'm coming from. And alrighty, once again for my newcomers, before we get straight into the neutral portion of the guide, combos, neutral matchups, etc., I want to make sure you guys get accustomed to the anime notation guide. This will help you out in the combo portion of the video, as it describes exactly what inputs are needed during certain strings, along with what buttons we're going to be pressing: the punch button, the slash button, the kick button, and of course the heavy slash button, along with D, which means dust. So you guys get the gist. Alright, finally, let's start out with Eno's neutral. Eno is a very strange character for beginners to start out with. Please keep that in mind as we move throughout this guide. Combos will be hard to hit at points, her hover dash is pretty floaty, and her block strings can be a pain to nail down. However, if you stick with this character, you have potentially one of the strongest rushdown archetypes, I believe, to be found in Guilty Gear Strive, with a tech ceiling that we haven't really scratched the surface of. In neutral, let me lay out some relatively safe moves that you guys can press when you want to fill out the space and, get something started. Her standing and crouching kicks is a extremely great poke tool, especially considering it combos into her 214K, a strong mid poke that pushes the opponent back and gives you stage control with her projectile, or better known as her 214P. Eno's projectile is going to be used pretty much every chance you can get, whether it's a knockdown situation or you push them back or you feel like it's a good time to catch them while they're blocking. Go into 214P and start that offensive pressure. You also really want to trust in her stroke the big tree move. Both slash and heavy slash go underneath projectiles and can low profile a number of certain moves. These will help you start Eno's rushdown and control neutral, as well as getting some block strings started. Not only that, if you happen to land stroke, you'll be able to get a stagger state, which can set up for blue beat combos and or more mixture opportunities. Now, with that being said, you shouldn't overly rely on both stroke and 214P, mainly due to the fact that you can get called out on it pretty easily. When it comes to, say, her musical note projectile, I've already shown previously in the Giovanna guide, she can not only run right through it, but enter a counter hit state and blow Eno up for ridiculous amounts of damage. And then moving on to the stroke, characters again like Giovanna and a couple others can just run straight through it and start jabbing you if they have a move that out low profiles the stroke. So you do want to be careful and time exactly when you want to use these moves and play a smart distance game too. She's actually one of the few rushdown archetypes where you want to mind your distance and not constantly be in people's faces, but rather make openings to get people to approach you and then blow them up with oppressive rushdown block strings and things of that nature. So keep that in the back of your mind as we further talk about how this character operates. Now, usually when I say mind your distance or mind your spacing as a rushdown archetype, it's usually because I want you to understand that disjointed hitboxes can hit you and blow you up for massive amounts of damage. However, this time it's nice to know that Eno's projectile is great at holding down people in block strings and block stun, because depending on the distance given, it will multi-hit a number of times. This graphic by Snug Second Encore will give you an accurate distance of how many times the note will multi-hit depending on where you're at in the field of the battle. You want to make sure you use this as a visual guide to know when and where you want to space that projectile so you can get the optimal mix routes, so you can hit their shield multiple times as you dash in, etc. Things of that nature. It's also really great that you can angle it up, straight, and diagonally down. It's very, very helpful. This is the #1 tool in Eno's kit that really sets up for all of your mix opportunities and also sets up for some damaging combos if you happen to get a cheeky little note off in the middle of a string or RC something. Yeah, this thing is brutal. As for air-to-air punishes, her jumping punch is pretty good at cutting off attacks before they can even begin, and coupled with another hover dash, you can get some knockdowns, whether it's a slash hit or heavy slash hit, into 214P, which, as you could know, sets up for some pretty interesting block strings and mix-up opportunities of all sorts. Her jumping dust is actually a really hard read if you catch someone just above you and you know they're about to press a button. It usually sets up for a huge counter hit, and you could go straight into 214K and use that as a option to either push the opposition back, or you could RC and go into a big damaging combo. Well, the moment you've all been waiting for, now it's time to talk about what makes Ino, well, Ino, and it's the amount of mix she has. If your opponent blocks, and trust me, it's going to happen, you have a ton of options to mix people up. For starters, we have her good old hover dash into faultless defense, which can lead into a grab or crouching kick, or who knows what. It's really up to you to decide from there. When you FD in this game or tension block, Ino will fall to the ground really fast, allowing for some crazy grab mixies. Other highlights of Geo's hover dash game plan is hover dash slash into crouching kick into crouching dust, maybe setting up for a hard knockdown and using your 214P to cover the ground, or you could push them back with 214K, cover yourself with a projectile, and if you have the distance to do so, again, approach with a variety of block strings. Now, a lot of Ino setups involve using her RC meter, fast RCing into grab, for example, using slow RC to get around an opponent and cross them up, and if you have no meter, using her hover dash into jumping kick into jumping dust, and then using her 236 HS or dive kick, and then pressing the HS button again to stop all of your momentum and either go into a block string if your opponent decides they want to take their turn and start mashing through it, or putting the pressure right back on them if your opponent decides, hey, I don't really want to press buttons here, I'm a little scared of you. Yeah, you can set up for some really nasty block strings with that, but just to know that not all of it is entirely safe. It is what I would consider fake pressure, but for the people that are uninformed and are just going to be blocking, which a lot of them do, it is a great way of getting some damage started and potentially popping off with a counter hit. Now, before I go into recap, let me give you some more character-specific stuff that can really help you out and go a long way if you happen to find yourself getting blown up in a couple scenarios. 1. Instead of her normal fast RC grab, you can also use her dedicated command grab, half circle back then forward heavy slash, to not only dish out a ton of damage, but if done near a corner, can elicit a full-on wall break, giving you positive bonus and building all of that RC meter back, something Ino desperately is in need of. One move you should actually really chill out on using in neutral, however, is Ino's half circle slash. It is easily one of the most punishable things to be done in neutral if it's done off the ground, and if a character backs up away from it in midair, expect for them to pull up with a massive counter hit. If they, backstep, don't have to block at all, and can dash right back in and blow you up. It is insane how many times I've done this to Inos, and have seen Inos fall for this trap. It's really not the safest option, unfortunately. It is great for ending combos and maybe the occasional surprise overhead on overly defensive players, but to use it randomly in neutral, I don't really recommend it, so keep that in the back of your mind as we move throughout. Alright, to recap, Ino excels at playing a very different rushdown than the rest of the cast. Keep baddies at a distance, use the music note to close the distance, and start Ino's massive rushdown offense. Remember, it's not about long combo strings with Ino, so much more focusing on constant mix and going for some wall break scenarios to build that RC meter back and continue the pressure. Not to say she doesn't have high damage combos, that's just not true. It's just that the execution needed for those bigger, long, ongoing ones is quite tricky to get down and it's going to take a lot of practice. So if you're willing to tough that out, stick with the character. It's going to be well worth it by the end of the run. So yeah, Ino has a lot of wonderful tick throws, phenomenal high-low mix-ups, extraordinary pressure, and some pretty strong corner combos. However, one of her major downsides is the lack of a traditional dash. A bit of a wonky air dash is going to take some time to get used to, and well, to be honest, a hard time getting in against faster characters like Milia, Chip, and of course even Giovanna. To counter, try to snuff out aerial moves with 6P, go into knockdown with 214K, and send that musical note to start their defense and start your offense. Soul Bad Guy, Kai Kisuke, Mei, and even Leo to an extent. These are all our balanced archetype characters. They're all pretty much beginner-friendly characters with relatively similar movesets. They pretty much all have DPs that can blow you up on counter hit, or if you're caught jumping in the air too often. They have safe moves that are usually okay to use on block or have enough range to make them pretty much safe on block. Good projectiles to use to keep you at bay, and even a bunch of aggressive options to prevent Ino from approaching from the air and even on the ground. For dealing with Soul Bad Guy, try not to jump around and hover dash too much, as his 5K will result in explosive counter hits and you are going to result in losing a ton of damage. Make sure you aim for his legs if you can. Try to get a couple sweeps and start that good offense. Even better if you have the option to bait out his heavy DP and go for a good strong counter hit, as that's going to be a great way to push him to the corner and really start your block string oppression. The same pretty much applies to Kai Kisuke. When he's charging up his projectile, especially the heavy one, make sure you hover dash around it if possible and go start your block pressure, or well, just make sure you can actually get a counter hit in depending on which version he's using. Especially if it's the heavy one, fun. You want to mind your distance. Depending on where you're at, your hover dash is not going to be able to cover that much ground. So maybe even better, using your own projectile to snuff out his heavy spark because of the range might go a pretty long way in helping you cancel out certain moves to help him gain advantage in neutral. If you jump in, make sure you fish for those counter hits, as they should be pretty easy to hit with Kais. They're usually always mashing for pressure, and a lot of their moves are actually quite unsafe and have a lot of end lag, so 6P is going to be your best friend here. A lot of the similar stuff that I said with Kai and Soul definitely apply to Mei as well. You are mainly going to be relying very, very heavily on your 6P. Hover dashing around Mei, at least in the current game, is to me very, very difficult unless you have the RC usage and you're back dash hovering and then forward dash hovering and mixing up your approach quite often. But she has so many good tools in her arsenal to just shut it down out the gate due to the crazy disjoint that is her anchor, that I wouldn't really recommend approaching from the air often, if not at all. You're going to be playing a lot of grounded rushdown offense here, and the only times you really want to be jumping around is either to avoid projectiles, avoid that dolphin, or start your block string pressure. So keep all of that in mind when you fight Mei. Just 6P, practice 6Ping through that light version of dolphin when she's charging on the floor, and you're going to be a-okay in this matchup. When it comes to fighting Leo, you really have to respect a lot of his ranges. He is very good at controlling neutral due to how long his sword can really command respect on the screen space. So make sure you use a lot of that projectile to catch him out on his disjoints. If he throws his light version of the projectile, just use your stroke move to get right underneath it and hopefully approach him up close. If you have the meter, you could RC and fast RC and get a grab, things like that. There are definitely some ace in the holes when it comes to dealing with him, and the matchup isn't too crazy. Just once again, mind your jump ins, because he does have a very, very powerful DP, and with its RC capabilities, it could lead up to insane amounts of damage. So make sure you keep that in mind when you're fighting this character. For the two high speed characters, we have Chip and Milia, and yeah, this is a rough one. I really recommend just anti-airing and blocking as much as you possibly can. When you anti-air them with your 6P or your 214K or whatever button you can use to get a good counter hit, they are pretty much going to crumble from their offensive strategies. They're going to be jumping in a lot, and they're going to have to start respecting you on the ground a lot more, which means you can set up for the music note and then go in with your offense from there. Just make sure you really play the hard game of knocking them down, and you should be relatively okay. But otherwise, just be known you're going to be blocking a ton in this matchup. They're extremely fast, and Ino's buttons and frame data in general is not nearly as quick to deal with a lot of the things that these two characters have. So just keep that in mind. This is going to be a very frustrating matchup when you're definitely going to need a lab, and other than that, good luck. So Axel's a character that is actually really hard to figure out here. He has a very excellent range and rushdown playstyle, so when it comes to spacing that music note, it is more prevalent here than any other matchup. Thankfully, there is a disjoint when he throws out his sickle and chain. He can take a little bit of damage depending on the distance that you are at with him, so your projectile is going to play a huge factor in this kind of matchup here. So make sure you use the projectile as much as you often can, or else you're going to be in for a world of hurt. If he's coming in from above, you already know the vibes. You want to make sure you anti-air, 214K, get that knockdown, send the music note out, and if he's jumping in a lot, remember you can angle it and then go in for either an air throw or something to get your pressure started. There's a lot of things you're going to have to figure out with this matchup, and really make sure you capitalize on every hit you can get and start some block string damage and things like that. Otherwise, you're going to be in for a really rough time, especially depending on how much screen space he's going to control. Do not let this man keep jumping back. It's going to be absolutely abysmal. So for Zato, Anji, and Faust, I barely have any information on these guys, unfortunately, due to the fact that just not a lot of people are playing them, and I haven't really seen any matches really with Ino, Zato, Anji, Faust, etc. From what I've kind of gathered from watching replays and things like that, with Zato, you just want to kill Eddie as fast as possible and just start smothering his defense out. That way he can't do his, evil within shield thing. If you can and have the options to, grab him out of air as much as you possibly can, and make sure you grab him on the floor too. It's a very grappler heavy game with this character, and you are going to want to start your block strings as quickly as possible. Hopefully before Eddie comes back, you can throw his shield up and you're going to blow up and take a ton of damage. When it comes to fighting Anji, use your projectile a ton. Only thing you can really do is fusion through it, and you could just grab him out of that if you ever see him spinning around. Just try not to jump in too much, because that anti-air he has is pretty devastating, especially if you're close to a corner. So again, mind your distance, use a lot of that projectile, and make sure you get a lot of grabs in to start your block strings opportunities. For Potemkin and Nago, they actually can be pretty tough matchups if you aren't going inexperienced, and you have to understand a couple of things before you play them. Number one, you literally pretty much can't jump in. They have a ton of anti-air options and a lot of really strong combos out of them too that could blow you up as so much as a mini hover dash. I mean, Potemkin has his Shoryuken grab, he also has his crouching heavy slash among other things. You don't really want to deal with that, so we're really going to be relying on the stroke move to get in and start our damage and start our oppression. And also when it comes to fighting Potemkin and even Nago to an extent, you don't really want to throw your music note out in neutral pretty much at all. This is because characters like Potemkin can just flick that music note away and cause a huge explosion that cuts off your air-to-air approach and also your grounded approach, making it very difficult for Ino to get any pressure started. What you're going to want to do is go for that sweep, get the knockdown, then use your music note to kind of frame trap and get things started. That's kind of a rule of thumb for all the characters, but doubly so for Potemkin. When it comes to Nagoriyuki, pretty much the same thing. If he's jumping in a ton, you make sure you grab him out of that jump in. That way you're going to be just fine when you're on the ground. Throw that music note to cover some ground before you dive back in there for block streak setups, and you should honestly do just fine. Just respect the big bodies. They have very damaging buttons that they can use, and they are going to lead into crazy counter hit combos if you're caught slipping. So you just want to respect them, play their game honestly, be safe, be careful, and then explode on them when you have the opportunity to. Lastly, we have Ram Lethal and Giovanna. Gio is pretty much a hard counter to Ino in many ways. Her DP interrupts the hover dash, her dashing slash goes straight through heavy stroke, and on top of that, if you throw your music note out, Gio can just use her 236k to jump through the music note, sometimes resulting in a counter hit and blow you up for pretty much a massive damage, a wall break, and all sorts of other stuff. It's kind of crazy how much stuff we get in this matchup, and we're very, very privileged as a Giovanna main. As for Ram Lethal, it's a hard matchup, honestly. She cuts off anti-airs with her big sword. Her music note that you have won't really bother her that much because she could just keep you at bay with smart neutral footsies and sword placement, and if you're ever caught jumping in and you're not blocking or pressing a button, you could expect a ginormous counter hit that can lead into extreme amounts of damage. I have zero idea how to really get stuff started against Ram, other than that you have to play the match very safely, look for an opening within her lows, maybe they're not blocking low that often, you could get a sweep off and then explode on them for big damage. But other than that, it's a really tough matchup that I'm definitely needing some help to the comment section to figure out. Now finally, I got some Ino combos to share with you all. So that's just a taste of basic Ino strings, and once again, notations will be in the description if the font was too hard to read at certain points. Overall, Ino is a really fun rushdown character with some clean block strings, a really sick command grab gimmick, and awesome combos to pull off. However, I feel like she's going to struggle in the long run with peak optimization due to everyone else in the game just being, well, to be honest, a lot faster than she ever will be in this game. And what she does at Rushdown, a lot of other characters like Gio, Milia, and Chip do it for a lot less work and a lot bigger reward. Times are definitely early, so I'm sure she's going to change throughout the course of the game and potentially even come out as one of the craziest or one of the best. But as of right now, she's still a very strong fighter, definitely worth sticking with if you find any interest in her, but I don't really see her taking off in the early meta at least, compared to characters like Giovanna, Chip, Milia. You guys kind of get the gist. Now before you guys go, I want to let you all know that this guide was pretty hard to make for me personally. For more expansive tech, as I can only do so much to help you guys out, I want to direct you towards these sources with great guides, awesome combo routes, and are just very great people to follow over at twitter.com in general, and will help you kind of shoot a little bit past the above intermediate level of play if that's kind of where you feel like you're at. Number 1, at UFO Orange over on Twitter, poster of many Ino tech clips, a really great guy who's been playing Ino pretty much since beta 2, and you're going to find a lot of awesome stuff over there on their platform. Please check them out in the link in the description below. Number 2, Diafoam, the Ino extraordinaire, has endless tech on how to use Ino, including their own guide on the character, which I highly recommend you check out, plus some very nice live stream Ino matches that are worth watching. Make sure you follow UFO Orange and Diafoam's links down below in the description, as they have a ton of Eno tech to help you out along that intermediate to higher level of play that's going to go a long way in furthering your tech. Thank you all so much for watching. It really does mean a lot that you stick to the end of another Guilty Gear Strive guide. If there's any characters you want to see, make sure you comment down below, or any tech, clips, things, whatever you want to share. You already know where to find me. Twitter.com is where you can send me some of that stuff, and if you want to catch up to date with my live streams, twitch.tv. Once again, thank you all so much for almost 1.8k subscribers. It really means a lot, and I got a ton more Guilty Gear Strive content coming on the way. Have a good day. See you guys next time. Peace.